Hundreds of thousands of people filled streets and city squares this weekend for women's marches around the world. And the now annual event started last year when women rallied together after the inauguration of U.S. President Donald Trump. But the 2018 march wasn't just about Trump. It was a chance to celebrate the movements around gender equality and oppression that have been building over the past year. Vicky Mochama is a columnist for Metro News. She was at the Women's March in Washington last year and the march in Toronto this year, and she's our guest this morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
Take me through the comparison between last year and this year. What's changed?
I think last year was specifically a reaction to Donald Trump, and so that's what you felt. You definitely felt that people were responding to the hostility of that moment, but also to the loss of Hillary Clinton. It was a very American experience, and admittedly I was in Washington. But this year, I think people were really expanding that out to talk about some of the issues that women have been talking about prior to Donald Trump's election, but also what we've had to deal with this year. And so it was a very different movement in that it felt like people were responding to the politics that was really around them and their realities.
What about tone in terms of frustration versus empowerment? Did you see a difference there?
I mean, you know, I've been in the feminist movements for a long time, or for as long as I've been alive, and so there's always a level of frustration. You know, there's a level of questions about, you know, how it is white women engage in feminism, or how it is, you know, the political priorities come about. There's always that level of frustration, but I do think overall it was a positive message. It was about how many women can we collect a year later, and that's really what it was, to show that there's still a level of attention to these issues and that women are still organizing.
One of the big takeaways from last year was this sense of empowerment that came by so many people gathering together. You were in Washington last year. This year we're in Toronto. Any specific Canadian issues being addressed?
Yes, in Canada, so there's a lot of, especially around municipal and provincial politics, a question of representation of women, and especially of women of color in our politics. You know, obviously in Toronto, we have, you know, a very diverse community, but that's not necessarily reflected in our politics. And so that was something that came up. And then, you know, more broadly, nationally, questions around childcare and how much that costs women and how much that holds them back. That was something that was, you know, that one of the speakers talked about. Another one was a young woman named Janelle Hines, and she's a digital activist, and she talked about inspiring young black girls to, you know, go out there and really own the moment. And so I think that those are some sort of very Canadian issues that were happening at the march.
What effect are you hoping that marches like this will have going forward? What kind of conversations do you want to see in this next year?
I think they can be really critical moments. They create a really critical mass around gathering people and connecting people. And so, you know, while people go to the march and they, you know, get to show their fun signs and they get to hang out with people who are really supportive of them, what also happens is, you know, people go for brunch and dinners afterwards, and that's when some real critical organizing really begins. That's when women sit down and say, you know, how can I help you with your issue? How can I help you in your workplace? How can I help you in your political field? And what can we do to really get things done? And, you know, from last year to this year, we're seeing an increase of women running in politics in the United States, and hopefully we'll see that in, you know, in our political situation.
Yeah, we've got a federal election coming up.
We've got a federal election in 2 years, and so, you know, so actually next year, and so those are the moments we'll see a lot more women, you know, bring to the public the issues that they've been talking about at these marches.
Vicky, good to have you here. Thanks for joining us in your morning.
Thank you.
All right, let's send things over to bed.